Welcome, dear friends. It is such a joy to have you with me today, and I am truly grateful for this opportunity to share a message that comes from the depth of God's Word. Today, we are going to explore the timeless truths found in Genesis 22 to 23, Hebrews 6, and James 2, and see how these scriptures relate to the challenges and situations we face in our modern world. There is a powerful connection between these passages, and they speak to something that every one of us can relate to: faith in action, patience in promise, and the testing of our hearts. These lessons are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago, offering guidance, encouragement, and inspiration for our lives. Let's start by diving into Genesis 22, a chapter filled with both heartbreak and hope. This is the story where God calls Abraham to offer his beloved son Isaac as a sacrifice. Imagine the pain and confusion Abraham must have felt. After years of waiting for a son, the son that was promised to him as part of God's covenant, Abraham is now asked to give him up. But here's what we learn from this: Abraham's trust in God was so deep that he was willing to obey, even in the most difficult and seemingly impossible situation. Genesis 22 verse 12 tells us that God stops Abraham just as he is about to sacrifice Isaac, it saying, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham's willingness to act on his faith, even when it didn't make sense, is what allowed him to pass this ultimate test. And God provided a ram as a substitute, revealing a deeper truth about his provision and grace. How does this story relate to us today? In our modern lives, we often find ourselves facing situations that feel like impossible tests. We may be asked to let go of something precious, or trust in God when the path ahead seems uncertain or even painful. But like Abraham, we are called to walk by faith, not by sight. Our obedience and willingness to surrender our lives to God, even when it's hard, opens the door for His blessings to flow in ways we could never imagine. Abraham's test wasn't about God wanting to take away something from him. It was about trust. And that's something that resonates with all of us. When life feels uncertain, then we are asked to take steps of faith that don't make sense to us. Can we still trust God's promises? This theme carries over beautifully into Hebrews 6, where we are reminded about the importance of patience and perseverance in the promises of God. The writer of Hebrews encourages us in Hebrews 6 verse 12, "Imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises." Hebrews points back to Abraham once again, reminding us that after he patiently endured, he obtained the promise. Abraham's story shows us that faith isn't just about believing for a moment, it's about continuing to believe, even when the promise seems delayed or difficult to see. Faith is active, it's enduring. In our modern lives, it's easy to become impatient. We live in a fast-paced world where we often want results immediately, and waiting can feel like wasted time. Whether we are waiting on a breakthrough in our careers, healing in our relationships, or clarity in our spiritual journey, we must remember the patience of Abraham. God's timing is perfect, even when it feels slow to us. Trust the process. Keep believing that God is at work, even behind the scenes, and that your patience will bear fruit. This idea of faith in action brings us to James 2, where the Apostle James talks about how faith without works is dead. Now, this can be a challenging statement for some because we often think of faith as purely a belief in our hearts. But James teaches us that real faith produces real actions. In James 2 verse 17, it says, "Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." He uses the example of Abraham again, pointing out that Abraham's faith was shown to be real when he offered Isaac on the altar. It wasn't enough for Abraham to simply believe in God's promises, he had to act on them, even when the action seemed counterintuitive. This is such a powerful reminder for us today. Faith isn't just about what we believe, it's about what we do because of what we believe. In today's world, where challenges are plenty, whether it's economic uncertainty, social upheaval, or personal struggles, we are called to put our faith into action. This could be stepping out to help a neighbor, pursuing that calling on your heart despite fears, or trusting God enough to let go of what's holding you back. James is reminding us that faith moves us. It moves us to love, to serve, then to obey, even when it's difficult. The faith that God desires isn't passive, it's dynamic, alive, and productive. Let's bring these teachings into today's world, where so many are facing tests of faith, whether it's due to personal trials, global crisis, or the struggle to maintain hope in the face of adversity. Just like Abraham, there are moments when you may be asked to sacrifice or give up something dear. In a world that often feels chaotic, you might feel like the future is uncertain. But just like God provided a ram for Abraham, He will provide for you. He is Jehovah Jireh, our provider. In the same way, Hebrews 6 teaches us to be patient in a world that demands instant results. God is never late. He is always working on your behalf, even if you can't see it yet. It may seem like things aren't moving, but your endurance and faith are preparing the way for a breakthrough. And as James 2 reminds us, our faith must be active, not passive. In a world that sometimes encourages us to wait for things to change on their own, James challenges us to be the change makers, to act in faith. Whether it's in small daily acts of kindness or in bigger, bolder steps of faith, our actions speak louder than words. They show that we truly trust God's plan for our lives. As we close, remember this: faith is both a journey and a partnership with God. It is about believing, trusting, waiting, then acting. Genesis 22 teaches us that faith is tested, but in that testing, God reveals His ultimate provision. Hebrews 6 teaches us that patience is a part of faith, and through endurance, we inherit the promises. And James 2 teaches us that faith must move us into action, for true faith is always accompanied by works. In whatever situations you are facing today, know that God is with you. He sees your faith, then He will honor it. The promises of God are sure, and His provision never fails. Thank you for joining me today, and I pray that your faith continues to grow and that you are inspired to act on it in ways that bless your life and the lives of others. Until next time, keep trusting, keep believing, and keep moving forward in the grace and love of God. God bless you all.